Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. Today we'll be discussing surveillance solutions in special education classrooms. My name is David Martin and I will be your moderator today. First, I'll give you a background about LENSEC. Since 1998, LENSEC has been a trusted security and surveillance partner with experience in the U.S. and around the world. LENSEC has a background working with many types of industries, and we help customers develop enterprise solutions for complex physical security projects. We've developed a powerful security platform called Perspective Video Management Software, and this is an enterprise CMS that streams and captures IP security video and incorporates video analytics, access control, and more into the software. I'll introduce our speaker today in just a moment. Let's first cover a few logistics for the webinar. We will be taking questions during the webinar, and you can enter those in your GoToWebinar panel at the bottom of the panel. You'll see a section labeled questions. We'll collect those during the presentation and answer as many questions as we can get to at the end of the event. The ones that we don't get to, we will follow up with via email after the event. We'll also be presenting poll questions during the event and encourage your participation in answering the questions as they are presented to you. They will pop up on your screen. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll present a survey for attendees. We'll ask that you answer a few quick questions so that we can better serve you in future webinar events. And if you're interested in a completion certificate for today's webinar, just indicate so on your survey. And then we'll follow up in a few days after the webinar with certificates, answers to the questions, and a copy of today's presentation. We also record these webinars and post them to our website, lensec.com, LENSEC.com, and we'll provide you with a link to the webinar video archive so that you can not only view this one, but past webinars as well. We do sponsor these on a monthly basis and cover a variety of safety and physical security topics. So check back with us to find out what's coming up next in our Step into Security webinar series. Today's physical security expert is Keith Harris, who is the marketing manager for LENSEC. Keith has skill working with law enforcement and government customers selling video security products. This includes training law enforcement personnel on video surveillance investigation techniques. Keith has spent 20 years in the broadcast news industry and has many years' experience working in the video security industry as well. So please welcome Keith Harris.
Thanks, David, and thanks to the attendees as well. We appreciate you making time to talk about this important topic. Cameras in special education classrooms. This topic is raising concerns in education circles. Texas legislators have already passed a law requiring video surveillance cameras in some special education classrooms under certain circumstances. Parents and advocates of special education students have raised this issue with educators and state lawmakers in response to incidents of student abuse in schools. Reports of abuse nationwide have advocates and parents concerned. Statistics show that the special education students are most at risk of abuse. On the other side of the equation are school districts that will have to spend millions of dollars to add cameras to special education settings. Advocates and parents across the U.S. are lobbying their legislators, requesting laws comparable to Texas. Now, we're not here to choose sides in the debate. What we'd like to do is provide you with some solutions. We'll spend some time talking about the law recently passed in Texas. We'll address the requirements and discuss possible solutions. Planning for implementation will require thinking about a few items that are different from a standard security solution in a school. We'll discuss how this plays into existing privacy laws with students. And as a disclaimer, we're not providing a legal opinion here. However, we are providing information about the requirements set forth in the law and shedding some light on solutions worth consideration. While much of what we talk about will be focused on the Texas law, we'll try to address this in a broader sense, looking at issues that are common to schools nationwide. So that brings us to our first poll question. David?
Yeah, our first question is your state considering cameras in special education classrooms? And you'll see that on your screen, and we'll give you a few minutes to make your selection of yes, no, or you're not sure. And as we allow you to select your answer, to date, Texas has passed the law. Correct, Keith, and other states are considering and process.
Right, and we'll go over that just a little bit, but there are a lot of states that are looking at this as potential law. Some have picked it up before previously, and some, Texas has actually enacted their law for next school year. So we'll talk about that in detail.
Okay. Let me show the results for the poll here, and then we'll continue on. Looks like is your state considering cameras in special education classrooms? Majority of you are from Texas, so 58% there, 8% no, and then 33 are not sure.
That sounds about right with what we've seen, or what we kind of expected to see in our polls today. Taking a look at the issue at hand here, students with complex support needs are most at risk, especially students who receive their schooling in an area set apart from the primary student population. These students may be subjected to punishment procedures or even abuse by staff at greater rates than other students. Some statistics show us that 12% of the overall student population are being served under the Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004. Students with disabilities make up 75% of students who are restrained in schools and 58% of students who are secluded in schools. The study by parent attorneys and advocates found that 58% of punishment procedures are inflicted on students with disabilities in special education classrooms or seclusion rooms. Disability categories that are most likely to be subjected to abuse are autism at 68%, ADD or ADHD at 27%, emotional disturbance at 19%, and intellectual disability at 19%. Incidents of abuse are often related to use of restraint or seclusion. The children described often do not have reliable methods of communication. They're unable to report abuse inflicted on them, and there's often a lack of credible evidence or testimony to build in a case when abuse occurs. As we mentioned previously, parents and special education advocates are lobbying their state legislatures to enact laws protecting students in special education settings. States are introducing bills mandating video surveillance. The first state to enact such a law is Texas, with a law passed in June of 2015. Now, we're not necessarily the experts on the law, but we do have a little bit of insight into what's going on as we've been watching it very closely. We recently attended, LENSEC recently attended the CTO K-12 Council meeting in San Antonio last year to learn a little bit more about this topic and heard some presentations here. We're kind of regurgitating some of that information here during our webinar and have done some research on our own to help fill this out and find some interesting things that we can bring forward, and also bringing our expertise to the table to take a look at the solution. Nationwide, there are petitions being signed in North Carolina and in Kentucky requesting lawmakers to consider this issue. The Georgia General Assembly has a bill before their house. A school district in Nevada received a parent request for cameras in special education classrooms, and an Indiana case of school abuse has sparked a call for legislation requiring cameras. In Iowa, they're addressing policies for school principals and administrators wearing body cameras, such as those worn by police officers. Michigan, Tennessee, Ohio, New Jersey, and Rhode Island have all considered proposals for cameras in special needs settings. The call here is for monitoring self-contained settings such as special education classrooms and other settings where staff care for children with disabilities. Texas' newly adopted statute requires cameras and microphones in special education classrooms. Their bill has been signed into law and requires compliance in the 2016 and 2017 school year. Other states contemplating legislation could follow suit and mirror what Texas is requiring. Texas State Senator Eddie Lucio Jr. authored the legislation. Recently, he was quoted by a media group publishing developmental disability news. Lucio said, "We heard testimony from students with special needs and parents whose lives have been forever changed by mistreatment in the classroom. It is my intention that the presence of cameras in these students' classrooms will provide evidence in cases of abuse and will also protect teachers who face wrongful accusations." Texas Senate Bill 507 is an unfunded mandate. That means the state is requiring school districts to bear the cost of implementation without any funding help from the state. The law applies to all school districts in the state. It also covers charter schools with open enrollment. The Texas Education Agency is looking to adopt rules to help administer the law. If you're interested in reading the legislation, there's a link on the page here that will take you to the website. We'll include that link with information that we'll send out in a few days following up this presentation. Schools are required to install cameras where certain circumstances are presented. The key trigger here for compliance is occurring when a school district receives a request for cameras in a special education classroom or setting. That request can come from a parent, trustee, or staff member. In the legislation, there's no grace period given for coming into compliance. The classrooms or special education settings are defined as areas where students receive special education and related services. So a special education classroom is in the requirement, and other special education settings could include resource rooms, ADA compliant rooms, life skills rooms, or seclusion rooms, also known as timeout rooms. These areas must remain under surveillance as long as the area serves special education use. If the room is converted to use for students without disabilities, then surveillance may be stopped. The new Texas law requires school districts and charter schools to provide written notice. That means the school must notify parents and staff in writing that video cameras are going to be installed. The notification should occur prior to installation. That's not the same as requiring a district to secure parental or staff consent. No consent from parents is required under the Texas law. The Texas law includes video recording for designated areas as well as a requirement to capture audio in that area. Video and audio should cover all areas of the special education classroom or setting. This goes for all areas except for the inside of bathrooms or areas in which students' clothes are changed. Those areas may be blocked from the camera view. There's no required level of quality of image designated in the law. However, as we'll see later in the presentation, quality and clarity of video and audio are always a concern when you're dealing with this type of project. The law doesn't require any specific budget amount to be allocated. Every project will be different depending on many different variables. There's not a cookie-cutter equipment solution that meets the needs of each area involved in the projects. As part of the documentation filed, there is a legislative fiscal note that discusses cost of equipment. The note indicates a minimum cost of about $150 per camera and mentions an inexpensive camera with limited quality video or audio. However, this does not indicate the budget level that each school district would need to spend per camera. It's only an estimate that was provided for legislative budget boards to evaluate the fiscal impact to the state. The cost outline here is really not a realistic number for what most school districts will need to be considering. The estimate only covers the cost of the camera without installation and is not enough to cover the recording of the equipment or other supporting equipment needed to capture the video and audio. Cost estimates are going to vary project per project and will depend highly upon what each district determines viable in their situation. In the fiscal note, there's a mention of additional costs for school districts to store the video and keep it secure. The districts could also incur costs to purchase masking software and video editing software in case the video becomes subject to public information requests. These are not typically included in video surveillance software and would require third-party software in cases where they would be needed. Under the Texas law, video and audio recordings should be retained for at least 6 months from the recording date. This presents a challenge as standard video deployments may only be designed to retain video for 30 days. This means ample storage should be designed into the system. 6 months is a hefty requirement and one that's not always easy to calculate. If you're storing video generated by one camera, that might be easy enough to figure out. But if your surveillance solution in classrooms has numerous cameras, each with different settings and resolutions, then you may need some expertise to help determine the appropriate amount of storage needed. Once your video is stored, you'll need to set processes in place for retrieving video from the server. Often, this can be done remotely, but knowledge of the video management software will be helpful. That means someone needs to be trained and have a familiarity with the features and functions of the software. Capturing video that's identifiable by camera ID, classroom, date, and time will be necessary. One suggested software feature to consider is an ability to tag video in your system. That makes it easier to find incidents in the future. Once the video is tagged, it can be easily retrieved and shared with other users who have access within the system. Retrieving video through the video management software is one step. Downloading the video in a searchable format is also helpful. Most systems have a capability to download video to a WMV file or an MP4 file, which is considered open format. Those can be played in Windows Media Player or an open format player called VLC Player. What you want to watch out for is a system that only downloads video in a proprietary format. Those can only be played with a proprietary video player that may not be readily available to most people. Right now, there are not any specific rules in place for the amount of time a school district has to deliver the video to the requesting party, but school administrators will need to think about who will be responsible for retrieving the video and making sure that it meets the state requirements. System administrators will need to set the processes in place and personnel assigned to find and retrieve incident video. The video recording of students is confidential by law. That means even staff and employees are prevented from viewing the video without proper access. Staff may not monitor activity in classrooms using the video equipment. This includes live and recorded video. Regular monitoring of activity is prohibited by law. School administration may not use the video recordings for teacher evaluation. The purpose of the video is to promote student safety, and that's the only reason that video may be accessed under strict guidelines. The video recording may only be released to appropriate parties under these specific circumstances. A complaint must have been reported to the district. In this circumstance, a school employee or parent may make a formal request and video may be released. Others may obtain copies or be allowed to view the recording as part of a complaint or investigation. These include personnel from the Department of Family and Protective Services, a peace officer or school nurse, a district administrator trained in de-escalation or restraint techniques, a human resources staff member as designated by the school board, or personnel from the State Board for Educator Certification. The previously mentioned people have an obligation to act on complaints under the law. If people that view the video suspect the incident violates the family code, they're required to notify the Department of Family and Protective Services so an investigation will be launched. If people viewing the recording believe the district or school policy has been violated, then access may be granted to appropriate legal and human resources personnel. Recordings may be used in disciplinary action or legal proceedings. In these situations, parents can request a copy of the recording. The law does not limit the access of a student's parent to their educational record. We're not going to tackle the open records request in depth during this webinar, as it really is a very broad topic with a lot of sublayers. However, I'd recommend following the link here on the page to the Texas Attorney General's website on the topic. The link below is a handbook on the Public Information Act. For our purposes, the video is considered confidential by law. Certain legal circumstances may allow for the release of video. However, school districts will likely oppose the release of video when they can. When differences of opinion occur on the release of the video under the open record request, the Texas Attorney General usually makes the final decision. Requesting video under the open records law is not a quick process. Usually the turnaround is 30 to 60 days, depending on various government entities involved. Texas law for cameras in special education settings does not waive liability from any school district or open enrollment charter school, nor does it waive liability from district or school personnel. On the other hand, the law does not create any liability against anyone either. If the school isn't compliant, that can be considered in litigation. The TEA may consider penalizing schools that are not compliant with the law. However, those guidelines haven't been published yet. And that brings us to poll question number 2.
Yeah, and that question is, if you are planning a camera project for special education classrooms, what stage are you in? And we've provided some choices for you. Are you researching at the moment? Are you building a project team? Has a site survey been done at your location? Are you seeking proposals and a solution, or are you not planning at this time? And again, we'll give you a few moments to make your selection. As I've been working with many school districts, I've found, each school district is addressing it differently. Some are already actively having site surveys, seeking proposals, and building a solution, where others are kind of on a wait-and-see basis. So we'll go ahead and see what steps each of you are in. And
another point to bring up, David, is making sure you're getting a certified security professional on board to help you, especially when you're getting to the point where you're ready to do a site survey. They can really help you customize a solution that truly meets your needs, rather than just pulling something off the shelf and going with that.
And with that, I'll show the results. It looks like many of you are either researching, doing things such as attending this webinar, and others are not in the planning stage as of yet.
Very good. Well, then we can move on down the line. I've got some good information for you for moving forward with your planning. Let's shift gears again to consider how we can deploy a camera system in special education classrooms. We're going to take a look at some equipment to consider. Each classroom will likely need 1 or 2 cameras in order to achieve 100% coverage. Classrooms with a unique shape or hidden areas may need more cameras. A network video recorder is going to be necessary. One person per school, or one video recorder rather per school, may be adequate depending on how many cameras will be needed school-wide. You'll want to calculate the storage to make sure your hard drives have enough space to achieve the 6-month requirement. For special education classrooms, I recommend a standalone solution. This means a separate special education classroom camera system that is separate from the security cameras on campus. Because of strict guidelines on monitoring and viewing recorded video, you'll want the system separate from any other systems to ensure the integrity of the video and audio. When you're planning your system, there may be a temptation to push to use inexpensive equipment due to the overall cost and lack of budget. I'll warn against this because of the seriousness of potential offenses. You really don't want to limit your ability to clearly identify your students or personnel. You don't want to capture low-quality audio or video. It's in the best interest of the student and the school to capture your best quality possible, and that helps you obtain accurate evidence. I strongly encourage you to get your IT department involved early while planning your video system. Getting the IT department's buy-in and support for equipment running on their network will make or break your implementation. When you're planning, network equipment will include Ethernet cable and PoE switches as part of the system design. Some IT staff have the ability to install the equipment, but your district may need the services of a qualified CCTV technician to help install that system. Your camera system for special education settings may run over the existing network, or a standalone network may be deployed depending on your current network infrastructure. You'll need to consider available bandwidth to transmit video from camera positions via the network to the recorder. If your existing network is bandwidth poor, then the IT personnel will have to help with appropriating or adding bandwidth for the project. In most scenarios, all video can be contained within the school building and shouldn't have to be transmitted remotely. However, some school personnel may have a good reason to store the video centrally in order to manage the recordings long term. You'll need to set aside some space for installing equipment in network closets. Switches and cabling, including video servers, may route through here, requiring rack space for equipment. Since the guidelines for access of live video or recordings are very strict, you want to make sure you secure the network. Changing default passwords on cameras and servers is a good practice with any security system. Because this law is an unfunded mandate by the state of Texas, schools may be looking for creative ways to pay for the equipment. School districts and open enrollment charter schools are able to accept and/or solicit gifts to pay for camera equipment. This could come in the form of grants or donations. The district may pursue this with companies who they have an existing procurement contract with. That would be helpful in leveraging their existing relationships on ongoing projects. There are several purchasing co-ops that provide some discounted purchasing to school districts through prearranged agreements with vendors. Notable among these co-ops are the Cooperative Purchasing Network, Texas Buy Board, Texas DIR, and the Harris County Department of Education. Of course, there are others as well. Check with your procurement office, and they may be able to help direct you to the co-ops that your school district uses. The TEA Commissioner may be able to distribute grants to school districts depending on the availability of funds. If there's an excess of funds in the Foundation School Program, they may be able to distribute that money to schools in need of funding for the camera system. The security industry covers a wide range of available equipment. There are inexpensive, low-quality systems designed for homeowners and small businesses to achieve video coverage without much effort or expense. On the other hand, there are enterprise solutions that can be quite expensive and cover many different locations with advanced features. Of course, you'll want to make sure that you are choosing one that has the right feature set that you need within the right cost point that you're looking for. A realistic equipment scenario could include should include cameras with an adequate resolution and clarity for a classroom environment. Consider today's available equipment. These would likely need to be IP cameras that connect to a network via a network to a video server. The solution would require switches that provide power over Ethernet to cameras. Also, storing your video locally at the video server will mean making sure your hard drives attached to the recorder are adequate to cover the required time frame. However, if you're storing your video at a remote location, the bandwidth for video transmission will be affected. You want to make sure the appropriate bandwidth to transmit the video to the storage location is available. This is where the help of a professional partner can come into play. A certified security professional can help you determine your appropriate storage capacities and bandwidths necessary for your video recording system. I mentioned earlier considering high-quality cameras and audio devices for achieving the best quality possible. Different resolutions or different situations rather, may require different camera choices. In LENSEC solution, we've chosen an Axis camera. We like the Axis M5013 for this job. It has a low profile, and so it doesn't look obtrusive. The camera has pan, tilt, and zoom capability so setting up your field of view is a snap. The camera may be powered from a PoE switch via the Ethernet cable. The built-in microphone is quite good compared to most cameras, so LENSEC isn't planning on including a separate microphone in most conditions, although some conditions may require it. A nice feature on this camera is a built-in SD card. This can act as a backup for recording locally on the camera. If for unknown reasons the network goes down or the recorder is not functioning, then the video can be stored on an SD card as a backup to the main system. When you consider that some areas of a special education room may need to be blocked from the camera's view, there's a few ways to accomplish that. A great camera feature that's offered in numerous security cameras brands is a privacy mask. This allows you to digitally draw a colored mask around sensitive areas, such as the areas where an aide might be changing clothes or a restroom door. Here's an example of what that would look like. Our picture here shows a doorway on the right that we'll assume is a restroom door for our purposes. In this example, we've drawn a privacy mask over the sensitive area. Anything that happens behind that privacy mask will be hidden from camera view and won't be visible in the recording. An alternative to a digital privacy mask can be achieved using a folding partition or a room divider. Just be cautious about those, as they may be easily knocked over in a scuffle, and your injury risks may be increased. I like the two-camera solution for a classroom. This may not be necessary for all classrooms, but it does improve the coverage over one camera alone. You'll see here in our diagram, we recommend placing the cameras in opposite corners of a square classroom to ensure there's no area that isn't in a camera view. It provides a reverse angle on activity that can provide better detail when incidents occur. Again, areas can be masked out using a privacy mask if necessary. When you have an odd-shaped room, you may need extra cameras to cover blind spots. A single or double camera arrangement may not be enough. Let's take a look at this L-shaped room. In this scenario, I'm using 3 cameras to achieve 100% coverage of the room. And that brings us to our third poll question, David.
Yes, thank you, Keith. And our question is, what is your state's law regarding capturing audio? And is it a one-party consent, all parties must consent, or other requirements, or you're not sure?
You may notice here we don't have two-party consent listed. A lot of states require what they call all-party consent, and that would cover 2 parties as well as more than two people involved. So it's referred to, for our circumstances here, as all-party consent.
And I'll go ahead and show the results. Here's more than half of you are not sure on the your state's law regarding audio, and then most are one-party consent.
Right, and that makes sense, as Texas is a one-party consent state. Let me move on here, and we'll show a little bit more details about that. Audio can be a tricky topic, especially when you're looking at the legal ramifications. There are many state and federal laws that must be considered when recording audio. Not following the law could result in criminal and/or civil charges. Also, it's unlikely that recorded audio will be admissible in legal proceedings if audio is illegally captured. So let's take a brief look here at the federal law. The U.S. statute is the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. I've provided the link here. Of course, we'll provide that again after the webinar. The federal statute allows you to record phone calls or other electronically transmitted audio sources as long as one of the parties being recorded gives consent. That's called one-party consent. In addition to the federal law, each state provides its own laws governing the recording of conversations. In most states are going to fall in line with the federal law, requiring one-party consent to record a conversation. Here's a list of 37 states that have current one-party consent laws. They're listed out here. Texas is a one-party consent state allowing recording of audio with only one party having knowledge of the recording. Also, Nevada shows up here as a one-party consent state. However, there have been various interpretations of their law. And for the sake of simplicity, some say that Nevada should be considered as an all-party consent state. Now looking here, we have 12 states currently that require all parties to give consent to be recorded. These states take a stricter stance than federal law. All parties involved in any of the audio that is recording must give consent. And many of these states take the easier stance of not recording audio at all. California does have an exception. You can record a conversation with the consent of only one party if criminal activity is involved, such as kidnapping, extortion, bribery, or a violent felony. In both one party and all party consent situations, audio may still be recording. The governing law in the U.S. Code is Title 18, Part 19. Trying to understand and interpret that law can be daunting, especially when you consider the way they phrase it. And usually it requires a lawyer with some expertise. Take a look at the Section 2510, Paragraph 2. This shortens our discussion and gets to a nugget of truth. Oral communication means any oral communication uttered by a person exhibiting an expectation that such communication is not subject to interception under circumstances justifying such expectation. But such term does not include any electronic communication. That's a lot of legalese. Bottom line is this: if a person expects their conversation to be private, then it is illegal to record it, except under special circumstances. It's up to you to ensure that people do not have an expectation of privacy. The simple way around this in most circumstances is to post a sign, and that can count as consent in most circumstances. That sign indicates audio recording in progress. Many businesses and schools post signs at their entrances indicating that video and audio recording are occurring. That's usually sufficient to meet the conditions of the law. Interpretations of the law will vary greatly whether you consider federal or state law. I recommend doing your own research to get an understanding of the law, but err on the side of caution. There may be special laws in your state for students within a school environment. Make sure you know what applies to education environments in your state. When in doubt, get a legal opinion. It could be worthwhile in the long run. It's helpful to know that laws governing audio recording are not on the books to keep you from recording. Their only purpose is to ensure that everyone's right to privacy is respected. So, as long as the spirit of law is taken into consideration and all parties involved are properly aware of the situation, there should be no legal barrier to recording audio with your surveillance system. Now that we've got a grasp on the law, let's talk about good practices for capturing audio. When you're considering audio for your special education classroom, don't make it an afterthought. Many investigations have been helped or hindered based on what was heard or not heard during the recording. With a quality audio solution, you should be able to make out a normal conversation in reasonably close proximity to the microphone. That's typically about 10 to 20 feet, especially when you have a classroom height of about 10 to 12 feet of the ceiling where you're mounting your equipment. Most cameras with built-in microphones don't provide very good quality. So the camera that's built into the microphone that's built into most cameras should be avoided in most circumstances. However, newer cameras, and especially well-known brands like Axis, have been making a lot of improvements in cameras with built-in microphones. The Axis camera I mentioned earlier, the M5013, is in that category. It's designed with a high-quality mic that does a great job with audio. If you're stuck with cameras that have poor mics or no mic at all, you may not be completely out of luck. There are mic solutions that will meet your needs. LaRue makes a great audio solution that can be included in your system. You can easily find a mic that will cover the entire classroom and provide very good audio. These are designed to be incorporated into an IP camera system. The differentiating factor there is an audio amp that helps increase or decrease the volume of the audio being sent to the recorder. If your audio is running a little low, you can boost the volume being sent to the recorder. If it's too high or overdriving or distorting, then you can drop the volume down a little bit. Your security professional should be able to help you incorporate a quality microphone into your system design. If you're using a microphone that's separate from the camera, I recommend placing it in a central location. You don't have to put it right next to the camera unless that's your only choice. A key placement technique for microphones is making sure you avoid placing them near an air conditioner vent. Any mic will be sensitive to the wind noise generated by the AC. Poor placement may prevent good quality audio in your situation. Before you install the equipment, test the mic in your installation environment. Make sure you're going to achieve good clarity in your audio. When you're choosing an NVR, your primary goal is not to decide on which type of computer you might use, although sure, some of the server components are important, but the primary deciding factor should be which video management software you're going to use. There may be many different features, each with differing capabilities. Make sure you understand which features will be important to your camera system deployment for the classroom. If you're managing multiple rooms and/or locations, you may need a full-powered VMS that's hefty enough for your needs. If you're managing 1 or 2 classrooms at a single location, then a simple recording VMS may suffice. I'd recommend finding a solution that allows you some key features, like tagging your video events. This will make them easier to find later and will help you be able to share your information with other key personnel with ease. Perspective VMS, for example, allows you to tag the video within the software and send a notification to another user. That person can access the system and pull the exact view that you tagged. Another important feature, if you're using the same system for security areas as well as classrooms, is being able to partition out certain cameras and block them from other people's view. You can set that up through your user rights within the software. That really helps you to manage your user permissions quite nicely. The software should make it easy to find events that you need and download them from the system. You should be able to create a video extraction and mark it for safekeeping, and then the video is searchable within the database. Another feature that's nice is an ability to lock down video in your archive and prevent it from being lost over time. When you lock the video, it stays on the hard drive until you release it. That's important for a lengthy investigation or when you may not have had time to extract and download a large portion of video. When you're choosing a video surveillance solution, make sure your system is easy to customize for your specific situation. You don't want to pick an off-the-box unit that may not meet your particular needs. Most NVRs have an ability to use a variable amount of hard drive storage. That will vary a lot depending on the project that you've designed. Your storage, if your storage is local on the NVR, you want to make sure you have enough. Now this is surprising. I ran a storage calculation that you see here on the screen. I used Western Digital's surveillance hard drive capacity selector on their website. You'll see here I calculated 2 cameras with storage for 183 days, so that's 6 months of storage. When we record an H.264 video format at a resolution of 800 by 600 at 30 frames per second, we need 12 terabytes of storage. That's a lot. That's assuming the recording is underway 24/7 during that time frame. Okay, now that's not really realistic for a scenario involving a special education classroom, so let's make some adjustments. Even if you adjust your recording for 12 hours a day, you still go through 6 terabytes of storage for 2 cameras with those recording variables. That's still a lot of storage, and we're not capturing truly high resolution at 800 by 600. Realistically, you'll need to work with a security professional to talk you through your specific variables to get a workable number on your recommended storage capacity. You'll also want to make sure you're using the right type of hard drive. Western Digital and Seagate are both making hard drives designed for surveillance solutions. The key thing to note here is that standard computer hard drives simply don't hold up to the rigors of a security system. Surveillance hard drives are designed and built for 24/7, always-on, high-definition video. Those drives are constantly working, continuously writing data to the drive. You need to use a surveillance-grade drive in your recording system to ensure less downtime. Western Digital is making a surveillance-grade drive up to 6 terabytes. Seagate just added an 8 terabyte surveillance-grade drive to their lineup. And if you're interested in that link to the HD capacity calculator, I'll include that for you in the materials we provide later. There are many different types of storage solutions for video surveillance, and I don't want to get too technical here. Your IT departments might have their preferences, but here's a few different types. Direct attached storage, or DAS, is attaching directly to the server, either internally or externally. Direct attached storage is most often used when a single NVR server is used for recording with internal drives. If longer retention periods are needed, eSATA or SCSI expansion units are used. Network attached storage, or NAS, consists of an appliance loaded with hard drives, and it resides on the network, not attached directly to the recorder. NAS drives may be mounted as network drives, though some NASs actually provide iSCSI services, acting as a SAN as well. Veracity Cold Store makes a NAS designed specifically for video surveillance. They offer a 120 terabyte capacity using around 60 watts of power, which is very versatile and has a high reliability rate. A storage area network, or a SAN, refers to more than just a storage unit, but this use as a storage unit has been commonly accepted. A SAN is a network either dedicated or shared, which is used for transmission of stored data. It differs from a NAS in that a NAS device contains an operating system and may perform other functions, while a SAN is simply used for raw storage. SANs are most often used when multiple recording servers are used, since they are typically extremely scalable, sometimes into the petabyte range. This makes data from multiple recorders stored on a single SAN simpler to manage than individual drives in numerous servers. RAID configuration offers two primary benefits for surveillance systems. They save the system from dying, and they save video from being lost. RAID storage may make sense in some applications, but not all. Surveillance integrators differ on their opinions regarding RAID configuration. But you should be aware of an important issue. When you set up a RAID configuration, you can expect a noticeable reduction in your storage capacity. Therefore, you may need additional storage drives to deploy a RAID configuration and achieve the same overall amount of storage. Edge storage is contained in the camera itself, either on a flash or hard drive. The primary use is for short-term backup of video at remote sites in case communication to the remote network is lost. Don't count on this as your sole source for recording storage. This is designed primarily as a backup. Cloud storage is storage that transmits to a remote location over a network connection and is usually under a contracted basis with a storage provider. I'm not a fan of cloud storage for enterprise solutions, though many in the security industry are advocating it. Cloud storage is attractive due to low cost per gigabit. However, the video data transfer upload requires high bandwidth usage to succeed. And if you want to watch or download the video, you have to go and pull it back from the cloud. The cloud service may not be able to push the video out fast enough for most people. To push the stored data back out for viewing, the cloud service may have to do something to the file, such as compress the size or quality in order to get it to you in a timely manner. Bandwidth costs can become economically unfavorable. Moving video is very data intensive and can be costly in the long run. Often you're paying for a monthly fee for storage rather than a one-time cost for local or central storage. Agencies with sensitive data should also be concerned about cloud storage. You have to ask, is the info secure? Encryption is broken by hackers all the time. Is the data being stored in a geographically close location to your proximity? Getting the data pulled from a geodistant location will increase the latency and return of the video you're requesting. The bottom line for me is if you're not the custodian of your highly sensitive records, then you're relying on that from someone else. So I'd prefer to be the custodian of my own records. Let's take a look at some of the federal law protecting students in education environments. FERPA is the U.S. law governing education rights. Here's what FERPA includes. It stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This law gives students, parents, and guardians the right to review education records in a timely manner. It gives students and parents the right to request an amendment to students' education records. And you see a few other items are covered here as well. Just as important for our purposes today, let's consider what's not included in the education record. You'll see them detailed out here, but I really want to focus in on security records. Law enforcement or campus security records that are solely for law enforcement purposes and maintained solely by the law enforcement unit are not included in the education record. So let's key in on the primary factor here. Security video should be maintained by the law enforcement or campus security unit. This goes for general security video as well as the classroom, special education classroom setting video that we're discussing. Images of students captured on security video that is maintained by the school's law enforcement unit are not considered education records under FERPA. Therefore, these videos may be shared with parents of students whose images are on the video without a FERPA request. Also, the recording can be shared with outside law enforcement authorities as appropriate. The Texas law for cameras in special education classrooms also clearly indicates that video recordings are not part of the education record. The recommendation for law enforcement designation is made in a brochure published by the U.S. Department of Education. The brochure is titled Balancing Student Privacy and School Safety, a Guide to the FERPA Act for Elementary and Secondary Schools. The brochure states, schools that do not have a designated law enforcement unit might consider designating an employee to serve as the law enforcement unit in order to maintain the security camera and determine the appropriate circumstances in which the school would disclose recorded images. There's a link for the brochure there that we'll get over to you. Now, moving forward, there's a few things to do. Identify each school and each special education classroom or setting that meet the requirements outlined in the law. Do a site survey. Determine where cameras should be located in each identified classroom and setting. Look at camera placement for each special education classroom or setting. Look at mic placement as well as needed. Research your cameras and necessary equipment discussed. Identify the possible number of cameras and storage capacity needed. Research your funding sources, such as solicitations, gifts, grants, and donations. Determine a process to receive and respond to a request to review the recording. And then you'll want to develop a form for complaints and requests that include the following: the date of the complaint, name and position of the complainant, name of the student, date, time, and location of the alleged incident, and people involved in the alleged incident if known. You'll want to determine a process and develop a form to notify all school staff and parents that cameras will be installed. Keep an eye out for further guidance from the Commissioner. Also watch for the creation of a grant program and be prepared to make your application. So as we wrap up, let's consider a few best practices that schools should consider. Anticipate questions for compliance early. Be proactive rather than reactive. It's better to have a plan in place early. Evaluate your procurement and funding options now. You can't rely on grant funding. You may get lucky if you apply for a grant. Then again, you may be stuck with no funding at all, except what you can generate on your own. Review your existing procurement vendors and contracts to see if you can leverage your existing relationships for funding. Identify your responsible district personnel. Get these people familiar with their roles and the law as it relates to their role. It may be a good idea to have them watch this webinar once we post the recording to our archive. When we get it posted, we'll notify you. Feel free to share it with others in your school district and help them get up to speed as well. Expect changes. They're inevitable. It's important you stay abreast of the changes that happen. Most of those will be coming down from TEA. And as a general rule of thumb for your own security video at your school, consider designating a law enforcement unit to maintain the security records as recommended by the DOE. Again, the recordings in special education classrooms are not subject to FERPA and are not part of the education record. So that brings us to our questions and answers. David, what do we have?
Okay, we do like to respect your time by starting on time and ending on time. So we'll get to as many as we can here in a few minutes and then follow up via email after the webinar in a few days. Keith will post our contact information on here as well for you. You can reach out to myself or Keith with any questions regarding this webinar or physical security needs in general. But to start with the questions, Keith, there's a few here I think I'll cover and then pass on to you. One, and you may have mentioned these in your webinar as well after the question was asked, but one was, what is a NVR? And NVR stands for a network video recorder as opposed to a DVR, which stands for a digital video recorder, where the digitizing takes place within the recorder. In NVR, it's coming from a true digital camera over the network. Hope that answers that question. Then another is, what is video masking software? Now, there's two instances of masking that occur in this scenario for special needs classrooms. One is what I'll call real-time masking done at the camera, that you can hide, cover areas such as changing rooms so that they are not recorded at all. Other type of masking, which is what we're referring to as masking software, is software that you use after the fact to remove maybe other personnel, children, from the video after it's already been recorded. That would be, such as editing software, masking software that you would use in addition to what you've downloaded to hide those areas. And then Keith, I've got a question for you here that you might help us out with. We've got a few minutes still. Keith, we've got a school resource officer that is employed by the sheriff's office. Is he designated, or can he be designated as our law enforcement unit?
That's a good question. So a school resource officer, also known as an SRO, is a sworn law enforcement officer. He has a responsibility for providing security and crime prevention services in school. The SROs are typically employed by local police, or in this situation, the sheriff's office. But that SRO works closely with school officials in an effort to create a safer school environment. Your SRO may be designated as the school's law enforcement unit. The school's LE unit should be designated in its FERPA notification as a school official with a legitimate educational interest. I've got some information on that I can include in a link from the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay. We've got time for another here. Here's a good one that I think all can benefit from. This is, does a request for cameras cover every special education setting in the district? Or is the request per school, or is the request per specific classroom?
Also a very good question and a very relevant point. In fact, the authors of the legislation recognize that the law doesn't clearly address the number of classrooms affected by a single request. They provided some guidance to the TEA and the Education Commissioner in a letter indicating their legislative intent. They said in that letter that the request is limited to a specific qualifying classroom or setting in which a parent has a child in attendance, or a staff member is employed, or a specific location requested by a trustee. We have yet to see what the Commissioner will adopt as a rule in answer to that question, but their intent was for that to be coverage of specific qualifying classrooms or settings.
Okay, I think we'll end it here. I do appreciate your time today, and thank you for attending. Keith will post our contact information here for you. You can reach out to us via phone or email. Also, we will be following up with you in a few days with webinar, answer to questions, a video link so that you can review this recording on your own time. So once again, thank you for having us, and Keith, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Glad I could be here. Thank you.